Greetings and salutations. You are listening to the Into the North podcast, where we take a look at the competitive side of the Commander format, also known as cEDH. I am one of your hosts, Lyndon, aka Noobzors, and today I am joined by my co-hosts, Matt, aka Null.
Hello.
Reed, aka Sick Robot.
How you doing?
And Morgan, aka Spleenface.
How's it going?
And in this episode, we're going to be doing a listener mailbag. Hooray!
Yay, catching up on stuff.
Yeah,
We've got 30 minutes
where,
to drag it down the hallway. It's so heavy.
Yeah, we've gotten to the point where we've built up a large repertoire of listener questions, and at this point, they're coming in faster than we're answering them. So
the mailbox has been full for like months at this point, and it's just been piling up around the studio.
Our house is gonna get robbed because of all the mail, and it's sending all the signals to the burglars that no one's home.
We're gonna serve you up some hot, unoriginal content, just the way you like it.
Oh yeah,
20 minutes at a time.
Okay, so
no, we can definitely keep coming up with topics. What are you talking about?
Before we get into that, what have you guys been up to since the last episode?
I've been testing out this new hot Theros card. It's called Nyx Bloom Ancient, and it combos with Thrasios.
It really does.
It really does.
Yeah, it just sort of does the job, huh?
Yeah.
Remember that time?
Natural Order is definitely a card you can play in cEDH.
Yeah, definitely is.
We played a game where Matt had I don't know, something like 20 mana before the Nyx Bloom Ancient, and then Nyx Bloom Ancient and a Seedborn Muse. It was a thing.
I didn't win, but it's because I let the goddamn Enlightened Tutor resolve. Because I took all the counter spells and the Rift out, all my interaction, because I had all these meme plays I wanted to do, and I realized my deck was defenseless.
Also, there was a Deafening Silence and then an Eidolon of Rhetoric that managed to...
Yoicks.
Just enough, yeah.
Okay.
Also, you can steal enchantment it, and that kind of became a problem.
Yeah, that was a problem.
Dude, steal enchantment.
I want to play steal enchantment more now.
Keegan from shout out to Keegan at QMTG, because he has definitely opened my eyes to steal enchantment. I am 100% on board with that tech.
It's always sort of been on my radar as like something that I sort of wanted to play, but I never figured that it would ever have like consistently enough enchantment targets. But I guess now with just like everybody and their mother playing Ristic Study and Smothering Tithe and all the staple ones and like everything else.
Yeah, dude, you get access to Sylvan Library in non-green decks.
Sylvan Library with Niv Mizzet.
Dude, okay, here's a play. You just get like 6 islands into play. Somebody plays out a Comfort of Flowers. You're like, it's a bait. Give me that.
What if you're the only blue deck at the table? No,
you're all just adding to the dark side problem.
Being the only blue deck at a table in this meta?
I do every night before I go to sleep.
Just four Gitrogs, man. That's just my dream.
That's all Lyndon wants to play. I guess the pre-release was between episodes, right?
Oh yeah.
Oh, true. Did all of you guys go to that, or I missed it? So
Reed and friend of the show Tom and I did a team sealed pre-release. It was
interesting.
It was pretty hype.
It was intense and lasted a very long time, but it was fun.
Oh my god, it was long.
It was we got there at like 10 in the morning and we left at like 8 at night. We were there for like a solid 10 hours.
5 rounds and then a cut to top 4 where you open a new pool and build a new deck.
And build new decks and then do another round, and the top 4 rounds aren't timed.
Also, that last round took absolutely forever.
Yeah, because for some reason we put me on the blue-black deck and it like control, and I'm not a fast player on control decks, and then somehow they put their blue-black control player across from me,
who they also mentioned was a very slow player.
Yeah.
Oh my god, it was brutal.
Amazing.
Both Tom and I finished our matches before Reed finished game 1.
Oh my god.
And then
it was so long.
We didn't quite get there. We lost in the semis.
It was because so
your blue black deck couldn't be as good as Tom's because Tom's had 2 Kiora Best the Sea God
in it, and had
That card's so dumb.
I had just about like 8 hard removal spells as well as like the whatever the flash crabs. So it was literally just he lives until 7 mana and then you die.
But yeah, it was fun, but it was a lot of magic.
It was a lot of magic.
Well, what's not to love about that? You know, solid 10 hours of magic. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of sealed or especially standard. So maybe that's not up my alley. But you know, it sounds when winning and getting to the semifinals, that sounds fun. So yeah. So without further ado, we can get into housekeeping. And now we're done housekeeping.
Finished up.
Yeah, no new patrons since our last episode. It's all right, but you know, we will. If you're listening and you want to be a patron and get a cool colored role in the Discord server
and a shout out in this section of the show, there's perks.
Definitely do that because we love our patrons.
And
yeah, new developments.
We get one more patron, then our lovely and talented editor might be pretty happy about that. So
yeah. So on to new developments. We actually got a really short segment for this as well. We only have one new development, and that's going to be the cEDH cast has put out their first 2 or 3 episodes, depending on how you count whether or not their first episode of like their intro is a full-on episode. But big shout outs to those guys. Definitely friends of the show, and it's great to see other cEDH podcast content out there.
Heck yeah, it is.
So that's our new developments,
and we'll make sure to link them in the descriptions on all the platforms.
For sure.
Can check them out if you're interested in more sweet podcast content.
Oh yeah,
who isn't? I mean, in cEDH, there's we've kind
doubling the number of podcasts every month. A 100% increase.
Yeah, and actually they had a really good episode. I just want to say before we move on is that they had a great episode where they had Shaper Savant on as a guest to talk about they talk about the Commander library, and they also talk about the impact of Thassa's Oracle printing, the printing of Thassa's Oracle. So that's a good podcast to listen to if you want their take on that as well. And you know, shocker, I'm pretty sure it mimics the take that we have and almost everyone else in the cEDH community has. So
not exactly a unique take, but you know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, our take isn't that unique either, but yeah, it's
just in general, I'm pretty sure like everybody had the exact same take on that one, but you know.
Yeah. So before we get into our actual main topic of the mailbag, you know, speaking of Thassa's Oracle, we want to kind of just do a kind of where do we go from here discussion, and this is going to be real quick because since the last episode released, we recorded that like maybe a week before the Banlist announcement. So, you know, this is being recorded after the Banlist announcement and no changes. So there's been a lot of rumblings in the cEDH community and EDH community generally, like both Reddits and all over Twitter, both casual players and competitive players weighing in, you know, competitive players asking for the support of casual players, and, you know, lots and lots of discussion, some toxicity, which is what you never want to see, but, you know, it happens and people are mad.
Yeah.
Blah,
the
blah,
situation
blah.
brings out the worst in people. So, you know.
Yeah. And we've combed through, you know, almost I've come through so many comments and Reddit posts and Twitter threads, and you know, I'm sure all of you guys are the same. We're not going to recap all of that. We're not going to rehash this discussion and, you know, kind of just stir the pot more. We're kind of that discussion has been had, and if you want to go, you know, read more about that, you can. There's a million different threads on Reddit that you can follow, so we're not really going to be linking to any particular one. But yeah, if you want to do that, go ahead. But what we're going to be discussing is what are the how do I put this? We're going to be talking about what does it mean that there was a no ban or no ban of Flash and that there was no changes announced. So this is going to be fairly quick. So the thing that I wanted to just get out of the way first is that no ban does not mean that it will never come. And that's one thing that people are getting up in arms about is that, no changes. It's all over, the sky is falling. You know what? The RC moves at a snail's pace. It took 2.5 years from the time Paradox Engine was printed to the time it was banned. And I know, competitive players were not particularly happy about that ban, but from the very beginning, it was being complained about by casual players. From day one, people were saying this card is busted, it needs to get banned. 2.5 years. And it's not like there was some great new card printed that really busted Paradox Engine wide open. That card was as good as it ever was from the day it was printed, right? All your Soul Rings, Mana Crypts, Signets and Talismans, Mana Dorks, those have all been in the format forever, and nothing new was printed that busted it wide open.
You got more Talismans, but that's pretty minor.
Yeah, you're basically doing the exact same thing from the start.
The fastest ban we've seen in the last long time was Leovold, which still took 8 months.
Yep.
Sylvan Primordial was around for more than a year. Prophet of Kruphix was around for more than 2 years. So, they don't just turn around and ban things instantly. And that doesn't, also the fact that they didn't ban, doesn't mean that they're not listening, because they absolutely are. They've been engaging with a ton of people, both publicly and privately, which is really great to see.
Discussions with the RC and cEDH community members, from lots of your favorite content creators and luminaries of the cEDH community, as Sheldon put it, those discussions are still ongoing. And importantly, some members of the RC and KEG still haven't made up their minds on this issue. So they're still mulling things over. I mean, some members of the RC and KEG have made up their minds. Some of them are pro, some of them are against, and you know what? That's their prerogative. But there are minds that are still being made. So give it time. Be a good representative of the cEDH community and present the best arguments. Don't name call and do some of the terrible things that I've been seeing on Twitter and Reddit. So
be good to each other.
First of all, it's never going to be effective, and even if it was effective, it's still not okay.
Yeah. It's awful because I see some of the toxicity I'm seeing on Shivam's Twitter, and Shivam is one member of the KEG who has been in our corner from the beginning. So definitely it's insane to see people who are accusing him of being not ignoring cEDH players. It's outrageous, honestly. Just
both sides of the argument.
Yeah.
Both sides of the argument are trying to preserve something that they're passionate about, and even just kind of saying both sides is kind of silly because there aren't even really sides. I think there isn't really a confrontation. It's kind of just, both there are two distinct groups, and they're both trying to do what's best for what they love. So
I don't think anyone involved here wants another group of people to not enjoy playing Commander. That's not.
Yeah.
People have different things.
It's a mutual love,
and that means they value certain things differently. But at the end of the day, our goals are all the same, which is to have fun playing Commander. One
thing I want to mention as well, because I see this get brought up all the time, is that first of all, everyone always attacks Sheldon, and he is not a one-man team. There's a 4-member RC, and however many people are on the KEG. There's a big group of people who are doing this. It's not all Sheldon's fault, but one thing people is they say that Sheldon has no idea that it's too strong or anything like that. It's dude, you can the RC, they know how busted it is. Okay, they know they understand that Flash does broken things. They are not ignorant of Magic and other Magic formats. Flash is
just the most
well
qualified.
known. Yeah,
I feel like especially Sheldon has like many years of competitive.
There are
like
former level
right?
5 judges on the RC. Yeah. They're like,
they understand metagame.
That's another thing.
They're probably one of the most qualified collection of people like in the history of the game to talk about like organizing a format.
Also, I think one thing that's worth noting is I see a lot of people making a lot of assumptions about how the RC functions or like what it is they know. If you're going to post a comment about what the RC does and how they make decisions, first of all, make sure you can actually name all 4 people who are on the RC. And second of all, just check your assumptions, because I see a lot of things like, oh, well, it's just one play group. And it's like, nope, they live all around the country. And there's a bunch of assumptions people make about what they may or may not know without even knowing really who's on the committee.
Yeah, it's just
like you just look like that's you the just look like an idiot, frankly.
Yeah, they're highly qualified, and most of what the contention is for them has to do with just the philosophy and direction of the format, and those are things that are harder to decide on. So, like, if you're gonna talk to them, talk to them in terms of the language that they're using, the philosophy that they've put forth, and you can read that in like on their website in the philosophy document. Speak to them in that language and make your arguments in that language. Don't just be like, well, it's really busted in competitive and you should balance the ban list for competitive. Like, that's just going nowhere.
And it's clear that that's never happening.
You're asking for the entire world there. Try to make a case using their own logic. And speaking of their own logic, one thing that we've seen get thrown around a lot by casual players and members of the CAG/RC, I mean less so the RC, mostly some CAG members I've seen, is using Rule 0 in to kind of address the issue of Flash. And there's all kinds of arguments that I've seen, put forth as a retort to this. But one thing I do want to address is that Rule 0 is sometimes a viable solution. Now, understand that it is not, we all understand here that it does not work for everyone. Some people have, the only cEDH they play is in, LGS tournaments, and the LGS, adheres to the commander ban list, or sometimes you're playing with randoms and this is what like the ban list is for, stated by the RC, is that, you need some kind of rule structure so that you can meet, with the LGS, you can meet and play against random players at LGSs and whatnot, but you have some sort of common rules to go by. But the whole idea of Rule 0 in Commander is that when you're playing with your friends and you're playing a regular play group, in your basement and, drinking some beers or whatever, that you guys can talk things out and agree to deviate from the rules as they are. You can use uncommanders, you can ban cards you don't like. I mean, you look at casual EDH as it is, and you could argue that there's a million different formats where, different play groups are banning things like mass land destruction and whatnot. And these are all kind of Rule 0 ban lists, a supplemental ban list. So if you really are opposed to Flash and you don't like playing in this kind of meta, you don't like playing against this kind of deck where there's like a tier 0 deck in the format, then talk to your play group, just say, maybe I'm not interested in playing in these kinds of games. And, if they're reasonable and understanding, you guys can generally come to some sort of agreement. And maybe you're like, okay, we'll play this one game with Sushi Hulk. And then after that, I'm kind of just want to move on to something else. Let's play some off meta decks or whatever. These are things that happen. You listen to any like casual or mid-power podcast for EDH, and I listen to a bunch of them, and they talk about these kinds of problems that their listeners have all the time. It's such a common thing in power levels that aren't cEDH to have one quick game where things aren't aligned and then move on to something else. So definitely try that approach if it's causing a bunch of issues. But, again, we understand that it doesn't work for everyone. So in that case, we are still pro flash ban.
And certainly,
I just wanted to get that off my chest.
Certainly, you also can't expect these decisions to be made unilaterally. Don't try and impose something that the rest of your playgroup really doesn't want on them. But yeah, like obviously there's no harm in asking, and like everyone wants to have fun, right? So if
you don't get to be the final arbiter of everyone else, but you do get to control how you enjoy the game. So if you're not enjoying it, you don't have to play, or you can go do something else. But don't try and fun police other people. That's one problem that we've fought long and hard for as cEDH players. Of this is a viable way to play the game. And you know what? It's a viable way to play the game with Sushi Hulk. So you don't get to browbeat your play group into not playing. So yeah,
I think that's pretty well said.
Awesome.
Yeah, I agree with most of that.
So with that out of the way, let's get into something a little more lighthearted and interesting, hopefully, and that's going to be our mailbag. So I'll start things off by reading the question, and the first question comes to us from Zeke the Impaler. Zeke's question is, do you have any advice for starting/maintaining a cEDH playgroup? My local LGS stopped hosting cEDH because of poor attendance. So, who has something to say about this?
Well, I mean,
okay. I think a quick rule that helps a lot to at least have an understanding of is, not everyone can afford a cEDH deck. cEDH is kind of like the biggest proxy format. So absolutely having a proxy friendly environment is a great way of starting. Morgan?
I mean, every community is different, and it is possible that there just isn't the density of players who are interested in your region, depending on where you live, because it is a pretty niche format. But I think that you need to figure out what the people who are showing up do want, or the people who might show up want. So maybe that means actually a good prize structure would entice people to come out, but it might also be the opposite. Talk to the people who show up very occasionally and say, like, would you rather this actually be kind of non-committal? You don't have to worry about, I'm spending $20 and I'm to play Magic, or is it like, you actually want the prizes because you think you can get some reward for your time and playing well. But yeah, like it is going to be hard in a lot of places, just because of how few players there are and how difficult it can be to get decks together. And it's also not a particularly beginner friendly format because there's just so much more stuff to keep track of. Like the concept of threat assessment doesn't really exist in 1v1 Magic, and that's like a huge amount of skill and experience and knowledge to get good at that. That's another important thing is when you do have new players, help them, give them advice, but don't be overbearing.
Maybe when you're playing with new players isn't the best time to flex all your politicking skills and try and make some like really advantageous for you deal, and like concealing information and flexing all your great player skills in cEDH. Like maybe it's time that you be more transparent and kind of explain and point out, I'm the threat right now because of blah blah blah. So help them. Getting new players into cEDH is going to be getting them up to speed, and the quicker they're up to speed, the more they can enjoy the format. Because honestly, learning cEDH, I don't think is particularly fun.
It really isn't.
It can be pretty hard
if you don't have, even if you do have a good play group. Like even playing a good deck, you can just get like mercilessly stomped by things that you don't really understand why they happened. and like
the
reasons why you lose is abstracted, and then like
even if you're just winning, right? Like if you don't know what's going on and you're not understanding like the awesome plays that you're making, it's like, I sandbagged this counterspell just for this right moment, and boom, you get that awesome payoff, right? Like there's lots. I find a lot of the rewarding experience to be from forming a plan and executing it. So if you don't really know what's going on, and it just becomes harder to accomplish those kinds of things. So try your best to bring everyone up to speed by sacrificing some of your win rate a bit.
Yeah, particularly.
And you don't have to go 1 to 100, right? Like you can always gradually make your way up to cEDH. Yeah, and you can lead by example, or you can you could specifically ask. Both are pretty effective methods.
And sorry, just going back to the politics thing a little bit, like I can say as a moderator of two different Discord servers where a decent amount of cEDH is played, one of the most common sources of conflict is a new player, an inexperienced player, just getting completely like puppeteered by a more experienced player, for whatever reason. And then, there's a big argument after the game. The person who did the puppeteering, they won the game. The other experienced player in the pod is upset because, like, what happened was so egregious. The person who was puppeteered feels used, and pretty much no one walks away from that scenario feeling good about it. So, when you're teaching, try and give people good information rather than sort of manipulating the information you give them to win a game.
Yeah. I mean, like, I feel like also
big picture, people, big picture.
Like, I think like you could probably have some people coming back with arguments about like, I want to practice my politicking, whatever. But like, first of all, against new players isn't the time to do that. And also, you don't necessarily like politicking comes naturally from just playing games, and you sort of like just learn how to play with people and stuff, and you don't necessarily have to like consciously go hard on that all the time, and you don't have to like constantly like try to politic people in like games that don't necessarily matter, especially like if you're not playing in a league or anything like that. Just chill out.
If you win by alienating your entire playgroup, you win one game.
Yeah.
And then you never play.
You don't get to play games again. So
the other aspect of this question in terms of maintaining a cEDH playgroup. So I think one thing that's important is to set kind of regular meeting times, and also to so cEDH players, they're not necessarily, it's not like EDH players where you can go to any LGS on their given EDH night and you're gonna get games in. cEDH typically requires dedicated cEDH nights, and spreading your message far and wide, and some people are gonna have to commute. That's just the way it is.
Like, it's a super grassroots thing at pretty much any level.
Like very, very grassroots.
You're gonna have to take initiative, and you're gonna have to like hold a playgroup together, because if you don't put in the effort to keep people showing up and make sure that the events are happening like regularly, then you're just gonna lose people.
Yeah, so some great models are like the Michigan. In Michigan, they've got a monthly cEDH meetup, and they rotate which city it's in, so that 1 month someone might have to commute, a couple hours, but then, the next month it's in their city, or they only have to commute like, 20 minutes. So that kind of structure allows them to pull people from a very large area. So one of the things Reed mentioned was like grassroots, right? It's very rare. I think it's pretty rare that you're going to have a large cEDH playgroup sprout up from a small population base. So Morgan, Matt, and myself, we all hail from the Kingston cEDH community, which I think is quite anomalous. So most cEDH, like large cEDH playgroups, come from big cities. So Toronto, we have, in the Toronto cEDH, you're pulling from lots of people, and most of whom are not from the same playgroup originally. It's not like everyone started off as mid-power, casual, and then slowly arms raced up to cEDH, which is how some of these isolated cEDH playgroups start. But in these bigger cities, you're pulling from a lot of different people, so that's when you might want to implement something like the Michigan model. But the Kingston is quite anomalous in that it's a fairly small-ish city and has a large cEDH playgroup, and that's going to be something that you're going to have to put in work into fostering yourself, and
making sure that people are actually interested.
Hard to give advice on how to replicate something like that.
I think you can give, at least I'll try to give some general advice on the subject, though. Even though I'm not organized, thanks Tom for doing all the organizing for Toronto.
Yes, thank you, Tom.
Friend of the show, Tom organizes pretty much all of Toronto's cEDH in every form. So thank you. But I think if you're looking to just grow a cEDH play group or just get people interested in it and to try to get more pods firing, really a big thing is just getting involved in the Magic scene in your city, town, in your population, and just getting to know all the people that play Magic, because it tends to be a pretty regular.
Picking off the legacy players.
Yeah, exactly. It tends to be a pretty regular crowd. And if you're also interested in playing other formats other than even EDH, and you're also going to an LGS once a week to play Modern or Pioneer or whatever, you can definitely get to know a lot of people, and they might end up knowing you as the weird competitive EDH dude. But it's good. You get a reputation, and you can just pick people off, get them interested, be like, hey, you want to test out sometimes?
Show up to Legacy Night wearing a trench coat, and what's the kid from that cartoon, the Recess, where he would open his trench coat and he'd have all these different things in his trench coat, all these different things that you try to pawn off on people. You do that. You show up to Legacy Night, and you just open your coat and you've got all these top tier cEDH decks, and you're like, hey, Legacy player, might I interest you in one of these decks? That's that's the number one method that we endorse as a podcast. So
wear a trench coat, and fill it with cardboard.
Next question, and this question comes to us from Tegan. What non-banned card is the least fairly designed card given the rules of this particular format? Essentially, what card benefits the most from Commander being 4-player, 40 life, singleton, and color locked, as opposed to the traditional 2-player, 20 life, non-singleton, non-color locked formats?
Wow, so, there's a lot.
There's a lot to unpack there.
This does kind of read like a gut check.
Yeah, right.
But, so I do have an answer. I do have a one card that I can talk about, but that there are definitely plenty of cards.
I recognize that there are probably better answers, but I have one that popped into my head immediately when I read this question.
Let's hear it.
And I think that one is Adnaz.
Yeah, it's the same one that
I mean, 40 life is huge.
It's the 40 life, but also it's the fact that in regular 1v1 formats, the fact that ad nauseum is an instant doesn't necessarily tend to come up that much. You're really only the only time it ever really comes up is when you're playing against a deck with a fair amount of counter magic, and you need to be able to slip it in, or you need to be able to threaten having it. And hopefully try to find a discard spell and then force an ad nauseam through. And it's just the threat of having it is really more impactful than actually being able to cast it in instant speed.
So that being said,
I think it's I just want to note that it says in the question, it was what non-banned card is the least fairly designed. So it's because it's Tegan specified, given the rules of this format and all these different criteria, things that are just obviously very strong, like Mana Crypt, Soul Ring, Flash, those are all kind of, just being ignored because they're not particular to this.
They're arguably even better in 1v1 formats than they are in.
Yeah. So if you're wondering why we're not going to mention those cards, that is why.
So, I think. Sorry, can I just
Sure.
Yeah. So just the fact that it's fairly rare in 1v1 formats that the instant speed on Adnaz particularly matters. I mean, potentially you can do it in response to an LED, but it's not you're doing it on somebody else's turn that matters. It's just the timing stuff. In EDH, it matters a whole lot that you can casting ad nauseum on somebody else's turn, right?
Only 25% of the turn time is yours.
It's so much more impactful. Like it's
statistical.
It's for the same reason that we'll link Morgan's write up on Flash and multiplayer, because it's basically the same concept, but it's just you get so much more time to cast it, and you get you get so many more windows from being able to just hold up the 5 mana and have other people have to do things, and you can, but that's my view on it, and that's my specific part that I identify it with. But Morgan?
So I definitely have to disagree here. Obviously you benefit hugely from the 40 life. That's obviously. The multiplayer nature of the format, yes, the fact that it's an instant becomes better, but it also, the multiplayer nature of the format also means that not developing stuff is typically much worse than it is in 1v1. If you don't develop stuff and you hold up interaction, and then your opponent doesn't play anything threatening, you don't spend your interaction, but your opponent also didn't develop a threat. But when you have 3 opponents, that logic doesn't really hold, right? You hold up an interaction for some win condition, and one of your other opponents plays a Ristic Study or a Bloom Tender or something like that. It's now you're behind that opponent. So there are positives and negatives to holding up 5 mana in a multiplayer format is a big ask, particularly if you're trying to do it with not a super high certainty that you are going to have an opportunity to cast ad nauseum. And it's very obvious, people see it from really far away, because otherwise it's really not a good idea to hold up 5 mana. The other thing is that the singleton is it really makes ad nauseum a lot worse. You have 1 dark ritual in 100 cards, not 4 in 60. And just the consistency on if we compare it to, I think Legacy is probably the most apt comparison
to the way that it's used in Modern, the way that it's used in cEDH, yes.
To the way that it's used in cEDH, the decks, there are obvious differences. We have Soul Ring and Crypt, so it's a lot easier to get to the 5 mana with cards in hand.
Well, especially from 0 mana. It's a lot easier to get off the ground from 0 mana in cEDH, I think.
Yeah, but well, is it? Because you still have 4 Lotus Petals in Legacy, right?
That's actually, yeah, that's fair.
The odds that you hit a Lotus Petal and an ad nauseum are pretty high.
Yeah.
So I think that in many ways the singleton, the advantages from the 40 life they counterbalance the advantages or the disadvantages from the singleton, but I don't necessarily think they're substantially outweighed by them. Ad nauseum is not a certain card, particularly when you're casting it from 34, which is a very reasonable life total to just get get down to before you actually cast it.
It doesn't take much life to actually take you off of an extremely effective ad nauseum.
The win percentages start to drop off pretty quickly after you take more than about 5 damage, unless you're on a super low curve deck, then you can take a little more. But
okay, well, outside of ad nauseum, which I think we've covered pretty thoroughly, there's some aspects. So we talked about kind of life total and singleton. Now, in terms of multiplayer, there's some cards that I think are much improved by the multiplayer, but aren't obvious. So things like Tymna, obvious, right? It's designed for multiplayer, so it gets better with multiplayer and having multiple opponents. Now, some cards that are designed for single player that are cEDH staples, like Mystic Remora and Carpet of Flowers, are cards that are much improved by, and Ristic Study as well, for that matter, are much improved.
Smothering Tithe is the big one.
Smothering Tithe was really designed with, it was designed with Commander in mind,
but I think
whereas Carpet of Flowers, Mystic Remora, Ristic Study were not. And the reason why I think they're much improved by multiplayer, just to kind of make it obvious, is that if you're main decking Carpet of Flowers in let's say some Legacy deck, you're not your chances of running into a blue deck and being, minus a card, running into a non-blue deck and being minus a card, they're probably too large to merit its inclusion in the main deck. Great out of the sideboard when you know you're going to face someone who's playing blue, but in Commander, Carpet of Flowers is like a slam dunk because it's almost guaranteed you're going to be facing someone who's on blue. Out of 3 players, 3 opponents, at least one of them is going to be on blue, and now you've got this amazing card. And Mystic Remora, the idea of cumulative upkeep, you get to have it in play for one opponent's turn, and it's much easier for them to play around in 1v1 because they can slowly tax you out of it with cumulative upkeep. But in multiplayer, you get to pay 1 mana for Mystic Remora, and you get 3 opponents you get to have the opportunity to draw cards from.
And there's also the element where if one of them develops without feeding it, like they're playing a creature-based dork deck, so they play like Fabro Elder on turn 2, then the people who have signets or whatever in hand, now there's a lot more pressure on them to actually develop. Like if one person's playing the game and 2 people are just like, well, I guess we can't play the game without feeding you cards, you're actually a lot more likely to get cards.
And even the creature-based mana decks play a lot of enchantments that trigger Remora and obviously Commander is a format where you kind of have a hard time avoiding tutors, and so they do play tutors, and they do play great interaction spells like the class of forces, and those all trigger Remora. I would even, so just to add to the point too, I would even argue that 40 life benefits Remora, specifically because of how weak just aggro-based strategies are. You can keep paying the upkeep cost on Remora without feeling threatened that you will lose just because you don't have a board presence.
Well, also
just due to how effective the card draw is.
Also because aggro decks tend to be a large, they would tend to be a much higher percent creatures than the combo decks that we see in cEDH. So the fact that you can't really play creature based aggro means Remora's a lot better too, because there's no you can't just run into a red deck wins type thing and then just have it completely bricked by one player. Everybody's on spells.
Yeah, so the trend you see in these kinds of cards and the big kind of rules text to look out for is when it says whenever an opponent does something, because of you get the more opportunity to. So some cards that I didn't mention, Compost, Runic Armasaur, these are all cards that see play in competitive format, not nearly as much as Mystic Remora, but they still do see play, and the only reason they are able to is because of this kind of text and the nature of multiplayer.
I think there's also some other sort of interesting effects. So Tainted Pact benefits a lot from the fact that it's singleton. But there's also some interesting stuff more along the lines of effects like Veil of Summer or Silence or potentially Boseiju, where against one opponent they would kind of let you play through one piece of interaction, but against 3 they can actually potentially be much more impactful. And they have a lot of different uses that you don't necessarily get opportunities to do in 1v1 formats. You cast a Veil of Summer to protect, you try and counterspell something, they counterspell back, you cast Veil of Summer, it resolves, you're also now free to cast your Vampiric Tutor or whatever. So there's just a lot of ways that...
And the non-blue player can't cast the removal at you anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one thing that I think we missed in our ad nos discussion on 40 life was Sylvan Library. That's a card that taking 8 life to draw 2 extra cards in 1v1 can be devastating, but in 40 life it's much easier to absorb that. And the last thing that the last kind of category here was get color locked as opposed to not being color locked. So I off the top of my head can't think of any cards that strongly benefit from the format being color locked. Do you guys have anything on that front?
I think all of the low color commanders in red and blue to an extent benefit from it or quasi benefit from it in that it's sort of free for them to run things like Back to Basics or Blood Moon, since they don't actually have the option to, like, it's not really a benefit, it's sort of negating a downside. But
because I mean,
just,
Blood Moon,
I guess just the class of like non-symmetric
and
stacks, right? Like, I guess Linvala kind of counts.
And so while in Commander, 4-color decks are, the more colors you get, the more powerful cards you can get to run, because the mana fixing is fine. So you do get Blood Moon punishing those kinds of decks. It's being color locked doesn't boost those cards that much stronger than they are in 2v2, because I think just generally more colors, better cards is a trend that's stable across both formats.
And I think it's just like because the mana hate being so much less efficient in EDH as opposed to like stuff like Wasteland or Field of Ruin or Ghost Quarter or Blood Moon in 1v1 formats. Being a lot better means that like it's just there's even more reason to just not be in lower numbers of colors, even aside from the mana facing.
Yeah, well, I think that's I think we gave some good answers there. Hopefully that satisfies your question, Tegan. Next question from Pibis. We have, aside from the Tymna problem and the Flash problem, I have a feeling that the top tier strategies are all relying on a very narrow group of finishers. Maybe it's subjective, but it seems like we're really looking at everything running Dramatic Scepter or Consult. Do you think that the format is fully explored in terms of viable ways to close out the game?
And for context, this is from pre-Oracle spoiler.
Yeah.
just so we get that out there.
So,
well, Morgan, you want to start?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think I think it's fully is obviously a very extreme word. I think it's very well explored in terms of ways of closing out the game, and these are the ones that are most efficient in terms of how useful the cards are on their own, how many cards you need, what the setup requirements are, and their hate vulnerability. Those are the ones that we see. Now, it is possible that those might shift in response to meta shifts. Like, it used to be that Scepter was like all over the place, and now lots of decks are actually like cutting Scepter. But I also think that it's like when we're talking about something like Flash and Tymna versus finishers, I think it also isn't necessarily the same kind of problem. Like, it doesn't really matter, or at least from my perspective, it doesn't seem to matter all that much how a deck, if all the decks use the same finishers, if there is actually a diverse group of strategies and paths to getting there. So if we look at something like Consult, like, I don't know, I've been having fun playing Sad Farm, Tymna Silas Farm, Turbo Ad Nauseum. Like, that deck wins with Consult most of the time, but it wins with Consult off like a turn 3 storm off into Mind's Desire or like a really early Ad Nause, versus something like Curious Control, which like wants the game to go as long as possible and draws like half of its deck before finally winning with Consult. So the finisher itself doesn't necessarily give a good indication of how the deck plays. Ending the game is often largely like the card that literally makes you win is not the card that got you to the winning state, which is sort of the important thing to keep diverse, in my opinion.
I do. So I agree to a point, I think.
I'm in the same boat. I agree partially.
I think it's true that win cons shouldn't be like saying like, oh, I don't want to win with the same win condition as that deck is probably like a bit overblown, and I don't think is like super valid. I think that, yeah, like it shouldn't really matter what you're winning with, as long as the decks play different and strategies play different. That being said, I do think that there's an issue with the group of finishers, like even pre-Oracle. I think there's still an issue with the group of finishers that we're seeing play, just because we've seen this trend over the past 3 years of more and more efficient commander agnostic win cons being printed, which I think is a real issue.
I don't think it's just that they're being printed. I think that this is just a trend that, Labman Consult has been in the format for a long time. And, obviously Jace kind of enabled that strategy further. But it's kind of been something that's been almost rediscovered.
Well, so sort of, yeah. So for specifically Consult, I wouldn't actually say that. That like pure Consult before Jace wasn't really doable outside of Kess, just because the combo is actually fairly it's fairly fragile, and like pure Consult without Jace or Oracle is actually like comparable to Doomsday, and Doomsday is better in a lot of cases.
Well, also you can kind of just, if you want to reduce it even further from Consult to just Laboratory Maniac, right?
Well,
at what point do you reduce the abstraction? Like, do you say Consult is the win versus Doomsday? Because the Doomsday lines were.
I'm not getting into that kind of like discussion. I'm just saying that like we've seen over the past few years the like certain key pieces being printed and the general shifts in the meta toward just win cons that don't necessarily care what's in the command zone to work. And I think that is an issue. I think it's a lot healthier for the format in order, like, when you have win cons that depend on commanders, because that like inherently introduces more difference in how decks play.
Well, but I think that the reason we're seeing that as an issue, like I think the causal root of that is actually that the commanders that you get to put your commander agnostic combos in are too good. Not so much that the combos themselves are too good. Like the fact, would we see a lot of dedicated Consults decks, or these sort of dedicated, very, tight WinCon package commander agnostic? Like, the problem is that they let you play Thrasios and Tymna, not that they let you play whatever you want. It's that Thrasios and Tymna are too good when you have a reliable way to win the game that doesn't, like, Thrasios and Tymna
Consult was going to make its way into so many other decks, even if you couldn't play Thrasios. You would still be playing it
in like most 5-color shells and Tasigur and.
But I'm not actually convinced that it's so. Okay, if we set aside any commander that's more than 3 colors and says draw cards on it, I'm not actually convinced that those decks, without, like, I'm not convinced that the decks that we're left with, that Consult is much better in the decks that it's in versus commander reliant win cons in the decks that they're in.
I think what happens is that a lot of much like the actual commander agnostic win cons, if you knock one off, the next best one becomes very popular. Like, you look at Doomsday when Doomsday was a big thing. It wasn't just one Doomsday deck, right? You didn't have Isar-Rev, you didn't have Consult being big, you didn't have Flash Hulk, but Doomsday was everywhere, right? All sorts of Doomsday decks, lots of Grixis Doomsday. But, as more of these have been printed, it's just been, you supplant Doomsday with the next best thing, and then that becomes pervasive, right? So you've got that problem inherent to these commander agnostic win cons, but if you knock off the best generic commanders, Thrasios, Tymna, you're still going to see the next best generic, value engine commanders adopting commander agnostic strategies.
Kenrith.
Okay, so let's say we didn't have,
like, look at Zur. Zur's a really good example, right? Zur has run Doomsday in the past, it's run Isar-Rev in the past, it's run Consult. Like,
sure, but I don't think Zur and Kess running Consult is inherently an issue. I think the issue that we're seeing right now is that the reward for your combo being commander agnostic is too high.
Yeah, so like,
I think that's pretty much exactly my thought.
I was about to say, like, I'm more comfortable with everything running Doomsday personally, and I think that's probably healthier in my opinion, just because there's an actual deck building cost to that combo, and you have to play bad cards, yeah, right? Where like the issue is all the commander agnostic win cons right now are just better than the commander dependent win cons as well, for the most part. So like
things are healthy when there's a balance.
They're both too good.
When
they're both too good and too splashable, which I think was the core of the point that I was trying to make originally, which is that like they're you can play them in everything, and they're also the most efficient things.
When you get to run a really efficient food chain package, it's great when your commander sucks. that's where we want to be ideally, right? When you're running these really strong, efficient win cons, your commander, you don't get much out of your commander.
There should be a trade-off of usefulness in the command zone versus like efficiency of win cons, in my opinion.
Tassiger is about where I want like Thrasios to be. That's what I. Not much stronger than that.
Yeah. So like
Tassiger's strong.
I mean, I think we're largely just sort of looking
converged
at the from different, like, we agree that where these two things intersect, it's too good.
Yes.
And we're just looking at sort of bringing which half of it are we bringing down. And like personally, I'd rather see I think that the reward for any commander agnostic combo is too high, and I think that you could go a lot deeper on cutting out the best commander agnostic combos and still have that be true with both Kenrith and Thrasios Tymna.
Well, it's just a pair of just the color creep and power in the command zone creep, as well as the win con creep. We're Matt, probably just too far in at this point in both cases.
Matt,
yeah,
you were gonna say something?
No.
Oh, okay, that's right. Well, we can cut that. But you were about to talk, and then I think Morgan and Reed got into something, and then I was like,
I might have picked up. I was talking to the cat briefly.
Beautiful. God,
you can.
We're so not engaging that Matt's just talking to his cat to pass the time.
Yeah. I'm trying to keep the cat away from the mic. That's a real strategic.
Trying to keep the cat away from the power.
Yeah, so we can wrap up.
Well, no, wait. Let's. Do we want to just talk about like any sort of potential win conditions that, like, the question wasn't actually about the discussion.
Yeah, okay, sure.
Do we think it's fully explored? Okay,
well, cool. Finish this last part. Yeah, okay. And then, so to talk about the last portion of this question, which is, do you think the format is fully explored in terms of viable ways to close out the game? I mean, personally, I think that most viable, like, I don't think there's going to be any shockers. Like, nothing is going to be like, whoa, I can't believe we didn't put 2 and 2 together, that these are cards that combo together crazy out of the existing card pool.
I think
things are either going to get printed.
It actually took a while to find the Spellseeker and all lines. Like, I don't think we're going to find a better commander agnostic win condition than the ones we've already found. But
better
maybe those and the commanders you get to run sort of knock a lot of these other ones out. But in a world where Thrasios, Tymna, and Kenrith don't exist, something like the Spellseeker and Null Lines would actually have been a very large development.
I think the current set of combos draw on aspects from not just Commander, but pretty much all like formats, and also formats and states, since their inceptions. Like, I think it'd be extremely impressive if some new novel way of comboing or winning the game was revealed that was like very much different than what we see now.
But Matt, why don't we have a Mr. Toad's Wild Ride yet in cEDH? That's a new way of winning.
I'm working on Nick's Blue Mansion. You can figure out the rest.
I think. Sorry, I had a real point that I wanted to bundle with that. Sorry, it's just before. Yeah,
sure.
I think personally, like, there probably are like some decent win cons left out there, but honestly, I feel like there have been enough people at this point who have just done the Scryfall trolling and Scryfall just flipping through pages and pages of vanilla bullshit just to look through. Like, I feel like enough people have done that enough times at this point that I don't think we're going to see any like real large shakeups.
Yeah, who's reading the comprehensive rules? Because really what we need is someone to be correlating every rule to all the possible interactions. Yeah, no, never.
And like, show me every card that says like enters or leaves or dies on it. Yeah,
I feel like it's just like And I feel like we've gone, like, we figured out, like, all the stuff that combos, right? Like the general classes of things that combo. And I feel like we've distilled most of those down already. It's like, you get the bounce stuff for, like, infinitely, like, looping ETBs and making that happen. Like, Teamer Sabertooth with all of that class of stuff. You have, like, the getting stuff back from grave and recurring stuff that we've pretty much gone through with reanimation. And then, like, we've pretty much done all the infinite mana stuff at this point from, like, untapping.
You're not going to be surprised by new combinations of cards. The only thing that I think in terms of whether or not it's fully explored is whether or not we've correctly assessed the power level of certain combos. So some things that I think actually might not be fully explored or might be underrated. I think World Gorger Dragon Reanimation for infinite mana, I think, is maybe a tad underrated right now.
Especially if people keep cutting Nature's Claim.
Oh, dude. Do you know what is incredibly underexplored? Ghostly Flicker loops.
Okay, Mr. Pauper Player.
Dude, I'm telling you, the card's insane. You target an Archaeomancer with it. You target a Mystic Sanctuary. Oh my god, you're off to the races.
Well, you can't just delegate tasks. You brought up the other one I was going to say. Mystic Sanctuary, I think, is one that is not being fully maximized, and this was in my end of year review prediction.
To try to break that card.
I mean, Sanctuary is just kind of insane value.
Can somebody just help me with my Melic deck, please? I just want to play Melic with Ghostly Flicker and Mystic Sanctuary loops.
Dude, I'll help you with your Melic deck.
Oh, beautiful. Dude,
sounds sweet.
He's like Elsha, except like he has like a 1-card combo that's not Proteus Staff.
Okay.
To be serious, I think that kind of going into what Lyndon was saying, and kind of adding a bit to it. I think that there are possibly some lower powered combos that have higher redundancy or higher alternate value. Like I've explored this territory before, but I think like having the Gitrog win condition package in other decks is actually a lot stronger than what people have realized, and it's because it's just such a strong card by itself. And what are you doing? You're sacrificing 1 land to put in a Dakmor, and then if you somehow have 7 cards in hand, you're just sculpting. Like that's ridiculous, and like that just is so dumb.
Well, I certainly hope, as the resident Gitrog pilot, that Gitrog in the 99 catches on and everyone joins the frog collective. That's definitely something that I would find very very appealing. But I think that puts a nice little bow on this question. When we've gotten to the point where we're discussing Gitrog, Secret Commander Gitrog in cEDH. Right. So next question we have from Jacodal. His question is, by changing one color, i.e. swap black for blue, shouldn't that be EG?
Nope, only swapping black for blue.
Yep.
I mean,
okay. I'll start from the beginning. By changing one color, for example, e.g. swap black for blue in a commander's color identity, what commander would you improve the most?
So, reading it as is, only black for blue.
Yeah, you can't tack on a color.
Dude, Varol swap black for blue.
Oh my God.
Play Flash the deck.
Of course.
Of course. Dude, what does blue green Hulk like miss the most? It's missing sack outlets. It's missing sack outlets. It's missing free sack outlets, okay?
No, and then you get Morgan is right. It's black tutors
in the command zone.
I'm going to pull a read, okay? But you know what deck is actually missing black tutors? Mono black to fairy. Now imagine that. Chainveil combo, you have bubbling muck. You don't even lose your high tide.
Oh my god. I just mono black, that's such a color break. That's
yeah, I know.
Funny.
I know.
So,
that's amazing.
You can do it,
dude. Okay, I think we were discussing this earlier, and Morgan, I'm not sure if you remember this, but I like fully agree with this of like mono green Yawgmoth, where you get like Young Wolf and Strangleroot Geist, and you get like all of the creature tutors. You get like the full creature tutor suite, which is like more than the black tutors that you get in mono
much
black.
less well set up to win with the Yawgmoth Sparkin. Like the mana, drawing 30 cards is a lot harder to translate into a win.
Hey dude, tell it to Selvala. Come on, dude.
No, the thing is, Selvala also makes a buttload of mana.
Dude, you play it like modern. You play it like modern Neobrand. You kidding? You're running like just you're running. What's the biggest? Is it like Worldspine Worm?
It's the new one. It's
the mono green card
worm.
Siegebreaker Worm, and then you're running Nourishing Shoal. Dude, easy.
So yeah, looking at maybe commanders with a few more colors. Basically anything that's red and white and 3 colors. If you swap one of red or white for blue or black, it becomes a lot better.
Yeah.
So like if Elsha or Kikar were either of Grixis or Esper, that would be pretty great.
Oh, baby.
It'd be ridiculous.
Whoa. Okay, yeah, color identity. Yeah. So I guess that also means if you're swapping Kikar for something, you get to swap the mana ability on him to change that from making
black.
red, which is basically colorless mana, to making black mana.
Marath.
That's big.
Marath seems like it would be pretty good.
Marath is like actually
Jund
just better Gave in Abzan.
Or Samut in Temur seems like it would be pretty sweet. I would be very down for that.
Samut is like
pod commander.
You could almost do if you put Samut into black, you could do like Hermit Druid stuff with your haste commander.
I mean, paying 5 mana to give your Hermit Druid haste seems pretty underwhelming.
Yeah, but give everything else haste too.
I think a Sultai Korvold could be kind of nuts.
I was thinking Korvold.
Yeah,
Korvold is
pretty gross.
Sweet.
Although you lose Dockside and
Korvold, because like Dockside's just so good, right?
Or just Grixis Korvold, yeah. No, that probably.
Yeah, but then
I don't know. The green is hard
green
with,
ramp,
with the whole food chain thing, but yeah.
And also just the ramp. But yeah, generally that's like that's what a lot of those swamps seem to be. You could also do some 2-color, like put Tygam in. I mean, I've definitely joked about Esper Tygam, but even just blue-black Tygam seems pretty sweet.
Yeah, like that's sort of nuts.
Currently, like Tygam Ojutai Master in blue-black would be disgusting.
What about Narset Enlightened Master? And like, you give it green?
I mean,
instead of like white.
Esper Narset seems like
it's still a 6 mana commander that has to attack.
Yeah,
like, and also when you make it Esper, you do get the tutors, but you also lose like all of the extra combat stuff.
Well, I mean, you just
I guess you can go Grixis
if you make it
instead.
Esper. I think you cut white for something.
Yeah,
I think
you make it Grixis to get tutors.
You know what actually might be after this switch, the only good blue-black commander? I forget the name, but the one that rebounds and your
Tygam.
Yeah, you said Tygam. Sorry, okay, yeah.
I was like, what?
Dude, Tygam is
there's
sick.
another
Although,
rebound
I mean,
commander.
Brago.
I was so lost in thought, man.
Brago would also be pretty good.
All these
Or what about
Animar?
Animar, giving Animar black?
In exchange for
what?
In exchange for red?
Like, red's like all of your outlets is the thing,
Sultai
right?
Animar? That sounds pretty good, man.
Yeah, like,
oh, no, guys. We're so baked.
Yeah, let's hear it.
It's Omnath. Locus of the Royal.
Yeah. Give Omnath black. Yeah.
Fine.
I can't believe
Sultai Omnath. Yeah.
That's not bad.
Yeah. Okay. That's the question is solved.
Right. We all agree that's the answer to this question.
Yeah.
The answer to this question is Sultai
Omnath. I can't believe Omnath still has other text.
But sweet.
Okay, so that brings us to our final question. This question is also from Tegan, who answered, I think it was 3 questions ago. Tegan asks, I asked this a week or 2 ago. That's as of
we're not going to tell you how long ago that was.
Plus.
It's fine. It's fine.
But given the recent printing of Labfish, what is the second most bannable card in the format?
I think there's a lot of ways of approaching this question.
Like maybe just Labfish.
I think, yeah, like that is a good card, but
I'm gonna say Tymna.
I don't know. I'm kind of on Remora.
Like Tymna just gives you such a payoff for adding black to like a lot of different color combinations, and like Labfish also makes you want to run blue-black. So
I think Tymna's a commander that
Tymna or Thrasios
is like a strategy honestly, that you can very easily tech against that just for some reason isn't teched against.
Well, I mean, the reason it's not teched against is Flash. So I mean, I guess the question is the premise of this question, given that we're assuming Flash is the most bannable card in the format, are we assuming that Flash is banned in this scenario and now we're banning a second card, or is this in lieu of a Flash?
Yeah. Let's assume that.
Because if Flash is banned, I think Thrasios becomes way less good. Like, activating Thrasios is not actually good. It's only good
but Thrasios as a win con in terms of infinite mana is still annoying in terms of for what he provides.
Infinite mana combos are generally pretty easy to assemble.
And you just, like, don't need the infinite mana anymore. Like, even if you ban Thrasios and just do Kaidel, like, all of the consult stuff is still pretty good.
Still does work, but I mean, consult as a deck with Tymna Kaidel seems, pretty weak, man.
I mean, so
like the fact that Thrasios curves into Tymna.
Yeah. I mean, that being said, though, like, if you ban Tymna, Thras Vial is the obvious pick, and I think it's still, like, comparable in power level.
I definitely don't.
I think it's worse than Tymna, yeah, but I think it's, like, comparable in how well it does.
I also think that for me, the white cards are like a lot better than the red cards. For how many, like,
potentially,
I think White's best 5 cards are better than Red's best 5.
Yeah.
If you're adding, so like,
I think we're a long way from
answering the question.
Casting putting a Curiosity on a Vial Smasher being comparable to Tymna.
Hey, you take that back.
Yeah, I think
putting a Curiosity on a Vial Smasher is comparable to Tymna. You just have to
find the curiosity as the issue.
Yes. The deck building and play restriction. Yeah. Yes.
No, honestly, I'm torn between wanting to hit Thrasios and Tymna or wanting to kind of just hit consult a bit.
Misty and Rainforest.
Unban Mox Ruby. I'm just kidding.
That's the sound of my hand slapping my forehead. But in terms of if you were trying to hit consult, I know this is just asking for a fight with Morgan or letting Morgan, just air all of his grievances. Which what do you want to hit, Morgan? Let's just give you the floor here. Is it consult? Should we ban consult?
No, we should ban Tainted Pact.
You always ban Tainted Pact first.
Wait, you always ban it first.
Yes,
but yes. Mana efficiency.
It's just like Tainted Pact's such a better card.
Honestly, yeah, Tainted Pact is a much better card. And
Tainted Pact is so much better.
So good.
Honestly, it's not even so much that people said Demonic Consultation over Tainted Pact. It's more just what really bothered me was that people said Tainted Pact and then cited the reason not as it costs 2 mana, but as it imposes a deck building restriction.
Oh my god.
If that's somehow a thing.
Okay, my favorite Tainted Pact, this is a bit of a side note, is just the exploratory Tainted Pact. It's like, I know I have a deck, and I know that it has an answer.
I know there's something.
Yeah, I know it has an answer, so I'm just gonna cast this.
I haven't actually looked at this list in a month and a half, but I think I know there's something in here.
Just built it this morning.
I believe if I remember the consultation episode correctly, the deck building restriction that Tainted Pact imposes is that you have to run Sunken Ruins.
Yep, that's the one. Yep.
Okay. Reasonable.
That's a tough call.
In terms of Tainted Pact versus Consult, I'll make the best argument I can for Consult over Tainted Pact, which I think is very. You can make an argument. I don't think it's very, very strong, but there is something to be said. So one, it does let you. It is cheaper. So while Consult is a worse card than Tainted Pact, it being cheaper means it's much easier for you to hold up counter magic to protect your combo. The deck building restriction of not having to run, singleton lands means you can run other things like, obviously if we're thinking about the, Thrasios Tymna meta, that's like almost nothing. And with these high color decks, there's almost no restriction or change to the mana base. So you have to kind of look the other way in regards to that. But, if you're looking at something like Zur or Kess, then with Consult, you get to run the Consult package, and then you can also run, High Tide if you want to do some Storm stuff.
I mean, would you?
And that's my best,
the best
argument for it, I guess.
Even if Tainted Pact didn't have the restriction it has, I don't think Zur would be on more than about 3 islands. I mean, I don't know. I guess maybe...
No, it's not true. That's not true.
I guess because Zur specifically finds
standard
back to basics. Zur's
back to basics, and then also High Tide is good with Shimmer stuff, and Shimmer layers somewhat well with Console.
Yeah. I mean, you can play a lot of islands without actually
like,
playing the card called Island.
High Tide's definitely performed in Sad Farm, and that is on a Tainted Pact mana base, but it's awkward,
that's yeah. And then I guess the only other thing in terms of, we were talking about the most bannable card, and that kind of insinuates that in terms of just like what's the best card for the health of the format, and the most bannable card is usually the one you're going to talk about is the most powerful card. But banning the most powerful card is not necessarily what is best for the health of the format. And you see this kind of in other 1v1 formats and that Wizards manages, where they'll try to ban cards that are enablers. Like they will ban Faithless Looting because that's the enabler, but it doesn't necessarily kill the deck, to try and make the format more healthy. So Dredge still exists, Phoenix still exists. So, there's obviously specific bans you can make that will just kill decks outright. But in terms of Consult, whether or not it's correct to ban Tainted Pact versus Consult or Thrasios versus Tymna, etc., the most bannable card is not necessarily the card that we think would be the next best ban. I just want to
also
kind of,
I think one thing that's implicit in this discussion is, or that the way we've been approaching this discussion is, that these are bans assuming your goal was competitive balance, and acknowledging, I think it's just important for us to acknowledge that that is not the goal of the rules committee. Like none of these bans are really like practical to suggest.
Yeah, I think like the if we're talking in the context of like what's the most likely thing to be banned, rather than like what. Oh yeah, if we interpret bannable as like what's the card that you could
forth one thing to the
like
rules
convince
committee.
The rules committee to ban. Yes, the card that you could convince the rules committee to ban. It would. I think it would probably just be Psych Rift.
I think it'd be Rhystic Study.
It might be Rhystic
I think
Study,
for the sake of cEDH, it would be Remora. But I could probably convince them more about Rhystic Study.
I think Remora probably deserves a ban if we're balancing.
Remora is like a tier higher for me than Consult, simply because of how much of a barrier it is into the format. Like, it's such a hard card to play against, and it is extremely one-sided and extremely unfun. And if you aren't the patient type of player, or you're just getting into the format, like you it's just a bad time for everyone. And honestly, even sometimes for for me, always when I actually play my own Remora, because I know that like people are going to make mistakes around it, and it's not necessarily their fault because it's a really hard card to play around, and I'm going to benefit. And it doesn't feel like you're doing anything like skill testing. You're playing this card that like you're just playing this card that like just wins you the game.
How often do you and I exchange looks at how people are playing around?
Oh God!
Like I'll let a Smothering Tithe go maybe once, and then I'm like just a turn goes by and I'm like, oh damn, he's got 10 treasures.
Well then.
But there were only 3 draw steps. What's going on?
Oh, anyways. And also,
yeah, it's crazy.
One more suggestion, courtesy of Jim from the Spike Feeders, that I actually genuinely do agree on is Divine Intervention.
Yeah. No, yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah,
I like it. Read Matt. Share
no, I know what Divine Intervention is. I wanted to look at that.
Share with our listeners.
Oh, sure, I'll do it. Yeah. So which want? Do we want original text or rules text?
Let's go with the Oracle
Let's go with
text.
the rules.
Yeah, do Oracle.
Yeah.
Oracle? Okay, Oracle. Okay, so I believe this is the Oracle. Divine Intervention enters the battlefield with 2 intervention counters on it. At the beginning of your upkeep, remove an intervention counter from Divine Intervention. When you remove the last intervention counter from Divine Intervention, the game is a draw. And that doesn't mean everyone draws a card. That means the game is over and there's no winners and there's no well, there's pretty much just losers.
Everyone is losing. Yeah. No winners, only losers. That's a good one that I think would be. I think that I could see the RC eventually.
I think they should ban
coming around on that one.
All Hallows Eve, but only when the rules were such that it was an enchantment instead of a sorcery.
Okay, I think we're wearing this question then a bit. So before we wrap things up, we've got everyone's favorite segment, Gut Check.
Gut check.
Gut check.
Woo. Okay.
You like them. Don't pretend you don't.
It's a character. Come on.
So this gut check is blatantly stolen from a topic of the Command Zone did like ages ago. And I've saved it in my back pocket for just the right opportunity.
So art for this episode is blatant thievery, is that?
Yeah, sure. So this gut check is, what is the best card in your deck? And so just to qualify this, I came up with, or I stole this before that's Oracle was announced.
What kind of credit are you trying to take right now?
So I
stole this before it was easy.
No Thassa's Oracle, BS. Like, pretend Thassa's Oracle hasn't been printed and ruined this format. So keep that in mind. What is the best card in your deck? I guess pre Thassa's Oracle.
All right,
well,
so I know what Lyndon's going to say
multiple times.
Is it best or favorite,
let's go in the correct
or could it be a
order
hybrid?
Okay, so
two answers. One thing, serious.
I've discussed this question. Like, I've asked this question to people on the GitRog server because, of course, I'm going to talk about the best card in GitRog. And one thing I want to kind of throw out is that we're not gonna. It's the best card that isn't some generic tutor or mana crypt or something. It should be something that's if you were to take your deck and compare it to all the other decks. It should be a card that stands above the other. It can be stuff that's shared between decks, but it should be doing something unique in your deck that's, elevating it.
I mean, the best card in my deck is Remora, but I'm not going to say that now.
Does winning the game at 2 mana at instant speed count as unique? Because not a lot of other decks do that.
It depends. Do literally all the other decks that play that card do that just as well?
No. Because hold up. Breakfast does it at 3 mana. Sacred also does it at 3 mana. The only other deck that does it at 2 mana is DMV.
Fine, Reed, you're allowed to give Flash as an answer, but you have to give a second answer as well.
Probably the other true. This is for Shuffle, by the way, for context, if people don't know for some reason.
Everyone put on your archaeology glasses and dig through the old archives to find the Shuffle Hulk list.
It would probably
in the pre-sushi world.
A tie of either Academy Rector or Survival of the Fittest.
Oh, it's definitely Academy Rector.
Yeah, I think it's Rector.
But like Survival is just also so good in that deck.
Yeah.
Survival is hot. I feel
like before I answer this, I have to ask a question to the other 3 members of this podcast. Shoot. What is my deck? Like,
it's Muldrotha.
Yeah.
Is that your answer? Like,
because but then you get to say Zer's weird.
Yeah, I do.
So I don't want to give you an easy answer. So you're on Kess. You're on Kess.
Okay.
Do you want to go?
Which
last?
Kess do you want to be? Kess Storm or Kess Consult?
I don't really play Kess Consult, so
there you go. Kess Storm. That's your deck.
Storm.
Is it just Mind Desire? I feel like it's just Mind Desire.
Yeah, there's a decent
case. What do you mean? Kess Storm is just a bunch
actually,
of
I think there's actually a card that's been better than
Morgan, you've got a card, or do you want to
yeah, I've got my card. I'm gonna say
you go for
it's Paradoxical Outcome. Just a ritual that also draws cards is a very, very silly card. And it's so much fun to play.
Matt, do you have your answer?
It's kind of a 2-parter. The first one is Neoform, and the second one is Linvala.
AKA Neoform into Linvala.
What is the deck? What is the deck for the audience?
Non-black, Thrasios, Bruce, value. That's just what I'm playing right now.
So actually, credit to Matt, neither of his commanders Neoform into Linvala, so those are actually separate answers.
Yeah, but it seems like the only thing I do because it stops everyone else in this metagame.
Okay, come on, Matt, your answer should have been Sigil Tracer. I love that you're just teching it. It makes me so happy.
Well, the whole deck is just a bunch of techs, right?
So if that was
that's the best way to describe your deck. Is just tech.
If I was talking about Inala, I mean, probably the answer should have been Spellseeker, but I feel like I would have just said Sigil Tracer. Because, like, I don't know, your win con is obviously, the best card in your deck, but
my deck is Gitrog, of course. Now, I've had this discussion with Morgan, so he knows what I'm going to say, but I'm curious, before I give my answer, I want to hear what Matt and Reed think the best card in Gitrog is. That's not like a compliment.
So you've asked me this question, and we've had this discussion.
Yeah, probably
so
just
I'm gonna,
wait, did I have this discussion with you, Matt?
No, but I'm going to tell you the answer that I'm going to give you the answer I originally said first.
Okay.
Just to be, I don't know, genuine about it. Like, crop rotation.
Okay.
Oh my god.
I like the crop rotation answer because as the Gitrog pile myself, my first thought was Life from the Loam, and to give the justification for that, it's that it's a very early tutor target often because it's a strong value engine.
Because it's
that
worked.
is generally immune to counter magic, with the exception of like Force of Negation. It's just going to be persistent.
Delaying a Life in the Loam is the best feeling in the world.
Yeah, delay is also not that fun. And then the fact that you can then turn it into a pseudo version of Dakmor after you've just like filled your large. So you got Gitrog, discard outlet, and you cast Life from the Loam, put 3 lands into your hand, and you're just going to discard and keep dredging that until you hit Dakmor. The fact that it's value engine and part combo piece or tutor for your combo piece just pushes it above the rest in my opinion. So that's my answer, but I didn't even really think of crop rotation, and I think if I'm recalling our discussion, you had a really interesting reason for that, and I'd like for you to share that if that's cool.
You're talking to me or Morgan?
I think it was Morgan who gave me the argument. Right?
Yeah, I had this discussion with you like a month ago, which is basically that crop rotation is the deck, or is the card that lets the deck do the most sort of unexpected things. It's a critical part of the instant speed win cons, which is huge, but also just like finding Homeward Path, finding like if you have to spend a Demonic Tutor on Homeward Path, that really doesn't feel good. Netting cards in hand, using it as a ritual with something like Cradle, Emergence Zone. Like, as someone who plays against Gitrog a lot, Life in the Loam is obviously extremely powerful, but it's pretty straight.
It's a known quantity.
It's pretty straightforward. It's like, oh, we got Life in the Loam. He's doing the Life from the Loam things. We should, find a way to exile the Life in the Loam or, take away access to the graveyard. And, like, what you have to do. But playing against Gitrog, if I could know that they never had crop rotation, that would mean a lot more to me than knowing that they never had Life in the Loam.
Yeah, in many ways you can think of, you mentioned all the things that crop rotation can do. Depending on the right circumstances, it is like, it can be an Ancestral Recall or, a very powerful Dark Ritual or something like that. Like it really does do a lot. Very strong utility piece. But yeah, so I thought this was a really interesting concept when the Command Zone did it, and definitely something very interesting when you apply it to cEDH. And I think what I really liked was hearing other people's perspective on the deck you play. And I think that gives a lot of insight into how your opponents perceive the deck, and maybe things that you're overlooking in terms of pivotal, strong cards in your deck or strategies that you should be leaning into more. So I encourage our listeners to, ask your play group what the strongest card in your deck is and give all, the necessary caveats. But it'll be really interesting to see how your playgroup responds, especially when it doesn't align with what you think the best card is. But yeah, I think that about wraps it up for this episode. So if you guys would like to reach out to us with any questions, comments, or concerns, you can contact us on Twitter at Into the North Pod, via our email, intothenorthpodcast@gmail.com, or on our Discord server, the invite link for which can be found in the description for this episode. An extra special thanks to all of our patrons who help cover the expenses for our show and allow us to work towards improving the quality of the podcast. If you too would like to become a patron, we are at patreon.com/intothenorthpodcast. Thank you as always to the band Vox Cadre for our lovely podcast music, to Nate Slover for our equally lovely podcast logo, and to our long-suffering podcast editor Roadkill. Next episode will be out in 2 weeks. Until then, see ya.
See ya.
See ya.
Have a good one.